These aren't storm clouds. This is the f***ing shit that they burn off, the f***ing shit they burn off in East Palestine. This is not f***ing storm clouds.
Morning, guys. There's a movie on Netflix I'd like you to check out. It's called White Noise, and it's about a train derailment in Ohio, East Palestine area. And a massive chemical explosion, and the white noise that was involved in covering it up. If that's sounding a little deja vu to some of you, I kid you not, there's this movie out there that was recently released, and yes, it has a lot to do with current events. This issue, caused by a $38 billion company owned by Vanguard, JP Morgan, and BlackRock, who generously donated $25,000 for residents to evacuate the area, a small area around the incident. But this incident is going to impact anybody along the Ohio River into the Mississippi, because these chemicals that are coming out of this accident are absolutely horrific. So some of you know about this, a lot of you don't. This story is one of those stories that just miraculously the big media hadn't picked up. Not until, the last couple days. It's something that was reported in local news. Local news knew about it. They reported on it. There's been a lot of people talking about it on social media like Twitter, etc. But a lot of the national news agencies didn't really pick up this story, which, apparently floating balloons is a bigger story than the largest chemical disaster in the United States, or that the same ownership of Norfolk Southern Railroad has ownership, shareholder interest in a lot of our news media out there. I think it has more to do with that, and I think that we've been distracted from this problem. Now, the first thing I want to stress here is that this is an accident. I think that the rail company is they're being negligent in their response. They're not doing enough to help out those who have been impacted by this mistake. And there's been a lot of discussions over the past year or so of rail strikes, the railroad shutting down because of safety issues. And this is what this comes back to, is some of these safety issues. We forced a compromise. I wouldn't say we, the administration forced a compromise with rail workers late last fall, going into the winter with these companies. These companies have their hands very deep in politics, and I don't trust a single thing that comes out of them. I would like to see more action taken here than what's actually happening. But last week on February 3rd, a train with about 100 cars derailed outside of Palestine, Ohio, right there near the border with Pennsylvania. On this train, there were at least 20 cars carrying hazardous materials. We don't know what every single car was carrying. I think they inventoried about 10 of those 20 cars, 5 of which were carrying pressurized vinyl chloride, which is a highly flammable carcinogenic gas. I would say a little later on in the process, the EPA sent a letter to the rail company stating that ethylene glycol monobutyl ether, don't even know what that is, but it sounds like something that's on a food package, ethanol hexyl acrylate, and isobutylene. I don't even know if I said those words correctly. They were all on there. This one concerns me though. Phosgene, which is a highly toxic gas, was also in the mix here. Now, what you have to realize about phosgene gas is that it's so toxic, it was actually used as a chemical weapon in World War I. Okay, so this is a gas that was used to basically kill people in World War I, a biological weapon. What has happened here is we have basically nuked an entire city with chemicals, okay? Now, what happened after the train derailed, the train derailment, based on videos taken from when it went through Salem, was caused by a bad axle on one of the rail cars, a mechanical malfunction.
Tonight, pretty stunning video raising a lot of questions, especially for people in East Palestine, Ohio. As you can see, sparks and flames underneath this Norfolk Southern train, and this was 20 miles before it derailed. The derailment, as we all now know, sent dangerous chemicals into the air and forced thousands of people from their homes for days.
Now the question is, when did the crew know that there was a problem?
What caused the mechanical malfunction, nobody knows. Maybe somebody who watched white noise. I don't know. I would actually suspect something like that. If I were them, personally, I would suspect that there was something that went wrong there. When this thing went through Salem, sparks were flying out of it. And how the rail company doesn't have a better system in place to see this stuff happening. It goes through Salem, sparks are coming out of the rail car. Stop the dang train. But, you know, it was caught on video. A lot of these were security cameras. It wasn't like live footage where somebody actually saw it and could have called it in. That car derailed the train. After the derailment, a couple days, around February 6th, I think. I could be wrong on the date. But according to Governor DeWine of Ohio, he said within the last 2 hours, a drastic temperature change has taken place in a rail car, and there is now the potential of a catastrophic tanker failure, which would cause an explosion with the potential of deadly shrapnel traveling up to a mile from the site. So what they were afraid of was these cars exploding, creating a massive explosion that would impact areas up to a mile. So what they decided to do was to vent the tanks and do a controlled burn. The thought process is if we burn the chemicals will go into the atmosphere and the toxins will dissipate. Well, there are fallout toxins from that called dioxins, and I don't think that they anticipated the amount of dioxins that would actually enter the environment, because what we have seen is animals, livestock, people's pets just dropping dead. Exposure to vinyl chloride can be very toxic to people. And what you have here is, with this controlled burn, is you have a massive amount of this chemical being burnt. I mean, if you look at the pictures, if you look at the videos of the chemical trails and clouds going up into the atmosphere in this area, and this stuff is traveling for quite some distance. I mean, it's not just traveling a mile or two. It is up there in the atmosphere, and then it's coming down, and it's coming down into rivers, streams. You're talking massive soil contamination. And this is a very, very, very big problem.
These aren't storm clouds. This is the fucking shit that they burn off, the fucking shit they burn off in East Palestine. This is not fucking storm clouds.
I don't know that they had any other choice than to vent it and burn it, especially if you're looking at the possibility of a massive explosion and the gases getting out. I mean, you have to kind of look at what Governor DeWine and the state of Ohio chose to do there, and recognize that there may have not been another choice other than to do what they're doing. But what is important is that the public understand the fallout of this and understand who is ultimately responsible for this, because this is a very big deal. It's going to impact people for a very long time. Taylor Hoser of Park Dairy in Ohio reported that animals were just randomly dying on his property. He also works with the state of Ohio in fox conservation. He actually has some foxes on his farm. He described the death of some of those foxes, getting watery eyes, becoming very droopy, and just kind of dropping dead. About 10 miles away from Palestine, Amanda Brashears, I think is her name, experienced similar conditions within her poultry flock, which just began dying. There have been numerous reports. There was a kennel, after going outside to take care of the animals, the toxins were so bad it was impacting them, so they got out of there, and they had reported that other residents from the area were reporting back to them things like somebody letting a 2-year-old dog out to go to the bathroom and not coming back. They go out to look for it, they find it dead. I mean, the animals in this area, in the immediate proximity, are dying. The impacts this is going to have on people, soil, water, future contamination is going to be massive. EnviroScience of Ohio was seen pulling dead fish out of nearby rivers and streams. They're basically brought into situations like this to clean up environmental catastrophes, and they were cleaning out just dead fish from the rivers and streams.
These aren't storm clouds. This is the f***ing shit that they burn off, the f***ing shit they burn off in East Palestine. This is not f***ing storm clouds.
This is actually a pretty major story. The fallout of these chemicals are contaminating the soil. The runoff in this area all goes into the Ohio River. The Ohio River eventually connects with the Mississippi. It could potentially impact thousands of farms. If you are in the state of Ohio, West Virginia, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, you should be aware. Any state, anybody who is within this watershed should be aware of what's happening right now and should seriously think twice about, at least testing the water that they're using to put onto their crops, what they're using to water their animals with, because this contamination may take some time to spread. By the time as it spreads, it's going to impact, I think, everybody in that watershed. I mean, this is a serious situation. This isn't a small scale thing. They reported pulling out 180,000 gallons of watery oil from this site where this happened. There's an environmental impact and rehabilitation plan going into the site area where this happened, but the actual impact of this is massive in scale. I mean, these fumes just went out into our atmosphere and floated across the United States. There's no telling, what the content and the fallout, chemical fallout is going to be for the surrounding areas, and then, like I said, everybody downstream in that watershed. What we do know is that it is having an impact on livestock, it's having an impact on animals, and that is impacting our food supply. Absolutely, it's impacting our food supply. And my concern is what we're going to see in the year ahead as we're raising crops on some of the lands that have been impacted. I mean, this could be one of the biggest disasters in U.S. history. It already is one of the biggest disasters in recent that we can think of, chemical disasters. But I mean, this has some serious fallout that's going to carry for quite a ways, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about it because all of the news stories all of a sudden were look over here, look over there. And nobody was looking at what was happening here. And because of that, I think the situation is even worse, because now you've got thousands of farmers who are going to be accessing water and contaminated sources from the fallout of this chemical spill. And they're not going to know about it, because instead of the media getting it out in front of people, making them aware of it, and possibly having some backlash on a $38 billion company who was gracious enough to put $25,000 towards the evacuation of residents. Because that story kind of got buried and has taken a while just to even come to the limelight, we're not even sure. I mean, you can't sit there and say that we haven't fully seen or been able to monitor the impacts of what has happened. Because when we turn to this later on and we just see these fumes of the chemical smoke going up into the atmosphere and traveling, we start seeing dead fish and things popping up in rivers. If there was more attention on this from the get-go, and the other thing is, where was the U.S. government in this? This is not something, in my opinion, that is state-specific to Ohio. This is something that's obviously impacting Ohio and Pennsylvania. Both of them had evacuation orders on this. This is a federal problem, and yet our government's spending millions of dollars shooting down balloons when the focus should be on trying to contain this particular situation. And that's my honest viewpoint on it. What happened in East Palestine, Ohio, with all the white noise going on out there, what happened is going to impact our food supply and our national security. And we're more worried about balloons and joking whether or not they're UFOs.
There's no indication of aliens or extraterrestrial activity. With these recent takedowns, again, there is no indication of aliens or terrestrial activity with these recent takedowns. Wanted to make sure that the American people knew that, all of you knew that, and it was important for us to say that from here because we've been hearing a lot about it.
There are too many mistakes out there, but folks, I hope you keep your eyes open and recognize what was done here. Because this is something that is going to impact, as I said, a lot of people in a lot of states as the chemical trail and fallout continues. The dioxins don't just go away and break down as easily as some of the gas vapors that went out there. I mean, admittedly, a lot of that will probably dissipate fairly quickly in the atmosphere. And it's funny how they'll tell you that in a situation like this, but they'll make CO2 sound like it's going to be there forever and kill everybody. But these are actually very, very toxic chemicals. Very, very harmful chemicals. Chemicals that have been used as biological weapons in the past that just got burned off and released into our atmosphere in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and into the waterways, water sources, killing livestock, killing animals, most likely hurting a lot of people. Just because they're not dead yet doesn't mean that there's not going to be long-term impacts there. And the story was just buried, overlooked. Just like, just like the story of, was it Mission Ranch in California the other day? Spontaneous combustion. You're talking about a ranch who, several years ago had 14 cattle trailers burnt by activists. Just caught on fire on purpose, burnt. And they had several fires on their property, brush fires, which, after the 14 trailer fires catching on fire makes you kind of wonder. And then all of a sudden, boom, all their hay goes up in spontaneous combustion. To me, there's too many coincidences there. I feel like what is happening is Harris Ranch, not Mission Ranch. What's happening on Harris Ranch is a little suspicious. Too many fires. The ranch is home to 100,000 head of cattle. Disruptions to its operations are critical, especially to the food security in that area. And this type of stuff just keeps happening, and we just keep getting distracted by things. I think it's a shame.